Welcome to Empowerment Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Friedemann, and we have a very important show today. Well, there is always a topic that I find is dear to my heart, and often I pick these topics simply because I have been either struggling with them or there was something that just really hit me, something brand new that came to me, or I just like to share also what I have learned along the way with my clients and of course personally as well. But this is a topic today that I think 75% of you listeners are dealing with, including us who are gonna be on the show today as the ones that tell you a little bit of what we have learned on that topic. And that topic is stress. Indeed, 75% of people in the Western world are dealing on a day-to-day basis with moderate to high stress. Isn't that crazy? So if you are asking yourself, well, on an average during the week, scale from 1 to 10, what is your stress level? If it's above 5, stay tuned, because we have some things to share with you, some tools and some ways to look at stress differently and also to manage and deal with stress differently, which I think is really, really exciting. Now, what is stress? For a long time, stress has been accepted by me as the background noise of a refrigerator. I just felt my parents' stress, and so I definitely picked it up, and I just continued to use stress somehow as sometimes a fuel, sometimes as a nuisance, but often I didn't really want to pay attention to that stress. And that is the chronic stress, the stress that just is about going through the day-to-day activities, dealing with these challenges that we all have. And sometimes it spikes, sometimes it goes into distress. If there is a bigger thing like an exam, or maybe you're dealing with a job loss or some money issues. And then there is this acute stress that we also can deal with, which is like an accident, or there is an immediate threat. And those things can also make the stress level spike. All our stress hormones are released in very, very high levels, and our body is getting ready to fight, flight, or freeze. And so that is the stress that most of us, this acute stress, only experience once in a while, and usually only lasts maybe 90 minutes. But that chronic stress that I shared with you, that stress that is just already sitting on your bedside when you wake up in the morning and doesn't leave your side until you hopefully can close your eyes and fall asleep, that is the dangerous stress. That is a stress our body is not equipped to hold on for a long time, which is why stress-related illnesses are the #1 cause of death in industrialized countries, whether it's heart attacks, strokes, immune disease issues, cancer. All of those things have a correlation with stress. So it's a big, big deal. And stress is not something that we were necessarily experiencing to the same degrees 100 years ago. There are studies that showed that our stress level increased in the last few decades. Why? Well, these studies showed 3 major reasons. One is that we have less social connections. We feel less embedded in family or in community. And so there is a greater sense of isolation, which in itself increases the stress. There's more on our shoulders. Another one is that we are feeling that there are higher demands on us. There's just more that we have to deal with, more that just seems to come at us, and more obligations to somehow fulfill. And the third one is that we have also higher expectations on ourselves. And that is something that I find really interesting, the expectation to be special. Our parents may have told us, well, you're so smart, you can reach all the goals that you set for yourself. Well, that sounds really nice, but that can put a lot of stress on yourself because you just feel in that moment, oh my God, what if I don't measure up? And then off you go on your stress track. And that idea also that, these expectations of, well, money is a goal to have, a stellar career is a goal to have, something being an outstanding citizen or a member of the community, that's a goal to have. Those expectations where being just quote unquote normal, average, is something that needs to be avoided at all cost, also create an enormous level of stress. And I think we all can relate to this. So stress is there, whether we want it or not. And now what? What do we do with stress? Are we just suppressing it, ignoring it, living with it, living shorter with it? Or are we actually learning to manage our stress, reduce it, handle it, and maybe use it if we are lucky? And so we are lucky because we do have an expert on the show today, a dear friend who has been dealing with his fair amount of stress along the way and has, through intense me searching, found fantastic ways and put together new programs on how to stress better. And I'm talking about my friend Arch Fuston, who is a coach and business consultant and is someone who has a lot to say about how to deal with stress. So Arch, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, Arch, I just want to go into your stress because, we always want to know, of course, so what makes you the expert of stress? If you have been a Zen Buddhist for the rest of your life, then you probably never really knew what stress is. So how do you personally, or have you experienced stress?
Yeah, I think the first really important thing for us to know is that it's not ours. We don't own it. It's not who we are. It's something that we experience. And by detaching from that identity of I am stressed, I'm stressed, to no, you know what, I'm just experiencing it right now. And doing that frees us up to get curious about it and better understand it. And so for me, in my journey with it, that's exactly where I got myself into trouble. It was like I tried to ignore it. I tried to avoid it. I wanted to eliminate it. And when we do that, as you mentioned, we miss out on a ton of wisdom because it only shows up. Stress only shows up when we perceive a threat in our environment, whether it's our internal environment or external environment. So denying those taps on the shoulder from stress are basically, blinding ourselves to all of this wonderful information. And if you do that long enough, those taps on the shoulder turn into a slap in the face and come back and get you in some kind of chronic illness or some type of emotional health disorder or migraines or something like that. So yeah, it's awareness to it, acceptance of it, and taking action with it. That's my process.
Well, I think the awareness is already a challenge because, as I said, the chronic stress is like that noise of the refrigerator that you pretty much ignore until the refrigerator is broken or you're on a vacation somewhere in a cabin on the beach and then it's so quiet here. So what is for you your stress awareness? How do you become aware of your stress, and what do you teach your clients and people that are going to your classes on how to become aware that they are actually dealing with chronic stress?
Yeah, great question. Well, the best way to think is basically looking at the brain and looking how the brain evolved. And so it started with the brainstem, or the lizard brain, which is all sensing the environment and not feeling in terms of emotion, but sensing it in your body, like your palms start to sweat or your muscles tighten up. And then on top of that is the monkey brain, the limbic system, which is all emotional and social connection based. And then on top of that, prefrontal cortex, the human brain, the thinking brain, the cognitive brain. So recognizing the signs, which is known as our stress signature, like when we start to sense a threat, a stress, like I said, maybe it's your palms start to sweat, or maybe your breath shortens and constricts, and knowing that when we address that from kind of the bottom of the brain up, from the brain stem up, versus from the top down, which is what we typically do. We try and think our way out of stress versus let's just use our physiology. Like, let's just engage. That's why breath work is so powerful, because it calms us at that primal level. And then once we calm that, we can then work on shifting to a different feeling state. Because when we start to experience a threat, our emotions shift. We just start to feel different. And so that's a wonderful, like we were talking about, tap on the shoulder to raise back up. So, things like gratitude. That's why gratitude is so important. Is it shifts us out of that fearful state, and then engaging in thinking that allows us to respond versus react.
So let's say, for example, I wake up with stress because I don't even know why. That's the interesting thing. A lot of people wonder, what's the difference between anxiety and stress? And I think they're like cousins. And if you have been stressed a long time, then you tend to be more, in general, anxious. But let's say you have this stress because, the dog wants attention, the kids need to go to school, the spouse is a slob, and overall you are dealing with, just money issues. So it's just like, that day-to-day grind. And so you wake up and you feel already tense. Now, you say going to the reptilian sensing as a first step and just doing a slow breathing would be something that just gets you already at the beginning of the day into a better mindset, into a better state. And then
Absolutely.
The next step could be going into a moment of gratitude or appreciation. And then the third step would be the thinking step, which of course is also the question, what are we actually thinking in order to get out of the stress? And this is something we're going to talk after the break about. So stay tuned.